The dog should have let go long before anyone found him. Snow swept across the empty Montana road in white sheets, erasing tire tracks almost as quickly as they appeared, while Staff Sergeant Cole Mercer stood beside his truck and watched a German shepherd struggle out of the darkness with something heavy dragging behind him. The temperature had dropped to 19 degrees, and the wind coming down from the mountains carried the sharp scent of pine, frozen earth, and distant wood smoke. Cole had seen exhausted working dogs before. He knew the slow steps, the lowered head, the trembling legs. But he had never seen one do this. The shepherd's sable coat was crusted with snow. Frost clung to his whiskers. Every breath rose in a pale cloud before disappearing into the storm. Between his teeth was a faded canvas strap attached to an old green military ammunition box. The metal container scraped across the frozen pavement with each step. Pull. Stop. Breathe. Pull again. Easy boy, Cole called. The dog lifted his head. Amber eyes met Cole's through the snow, tired but strangely focused. Cole moved closer, keeping his hands visible. You can leave it. I have got you. The shepherd took one more step and collapsed onto his side. The strap slipped from his mouth. Cole hurried forward, dropped to one knee, and placed a gloved hand against the dog's neck. Cold. Far too cold. Yet when Cole reached toward the ammunition box, the shepherd stirred and stretched one paw across its lid. Cole stopped. All right. I am not taking it. The dog's eyes remained fixed on him. There was no aggression in them. Only urgency. Cole removed his winter coat and wrapped it around the animal, shielding him from the wind. Whatever this is, it is coming with us. The shepherd's breathing eased slightly. Cole reached for the metal handle, and that was when he noticed 3 shallow scratches cut into the faded paint near one corner. 2 angled lines crossing a third. A crude little mark most people would have ignored. Cole did not. He had seen it hundreds of times on training crates, supply cases, notebooks, even coffee cups. Ben Carter had marked his gear that way whenever he thought someone might accidentally claim it. Cole stared at the scratches as snow gathered on his shoulders. No, he whispered. Master Sergeant Benjamin Carter had been gone for nearly 2 years. Cole had spent most of that time learning how not to say his name. The shepherd gave a weak sound and pressed his paw harder against the box. Cole looked from the mark to the dog. Something familiar surfaced beneath the frost around the animal's face, something he could not yet place. Then the wind shifted, lifting the fur beneath the shepherd's neck just enough to reveal the edge of a worn military identification tag. Cole leaned closer. His heartbeat changed. The first word was almost hidden beneath ice, but he could read it. Atlas. Cole slowly looked back at the old ammunition box. Ben, he said into the storm, barely louder than the wind. What did you leave out here? Atlas closed his eyes, but his paw never moved from the lid. 3 hours earlier, Cole Mercer had been driving south of Bozeman with the heater running high and a sealed property envelope resting on the passenger seat. Inside was the final inventory list from an old military K-9 training facility scheduled to close before spring. Most of the equipment had already been removed. Most of the records had already been transferred. Only a few personal items remained, including several boxes that had once belonged to Master Sergeant Benjamin Carter. Ben. Cole had not said the name out loud in months. He had become good at avoiding certain roads inside his own mind. He could work, sleep, answer messages, stand in a grocery store deciding between 2 brands of coffee. What he could not do was explain why ordinary moments still felt borrowed. The snow began just after noon. At first it was light, almost peaceful, settling across the pine branches and shoulders of the highway. By late afternoon, the mountains had disappeared behind a gray wall. Cole slowed his truck to 30 miles per hour and watched the road narrow into white. The training facility sat nearly 15 miles ahead, tucked beside an old service road that had once echoed with whistles, barking, and Marines calling commands across open fields. Cole remembered Ben there most clearly, laughing too loudly, drinking terrible coffee, arguing that Atlas understood sarcasm better than half the men in their unit. Cole tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He had agreed to collect the remaining property because no one else could identify what mattered and what did not. That was the official reason. The real reason was harder. The place was closing. If he did not go now, someone else would decide what belonged to memory and what belonged in a dumpster. When Cole finally reached the facility, daylight was already fading. Snow covered the training yard. The kennel stood empty. Wind pushed through the chain-link fencing with a low metallic hum. Inside the storage building, Cole signed the inventory sheet and began checking shelves beneath flickering fluorescent lights. 2 footlockers, 1 training vest, a cardboard carton of notebooks, a sealed bag containing Ben's old field jacket. Then Cole reached the bottom of the list. 1 green military ammunition box. He looked at the shelf marked with Ben's identification number. Empty. Cole checked beneath the table. Nothing. He opened the neighboring cabinet. Nothing. Great, he muttered. The facility manager had already left because of the weather, and cell service was fading. Cole took out his phone and photographed the empty shelf. That was when he noticed something on the concrete floor. Mud. Fresh enough to still be dark. A line of paw prints crossed the storage room and disappeared through a side door that had not fully latched. Cole stared at them. The facility had been empty for weeks. He pushed the door open. Cold air rushed inside. Outside, the tracks continued across the snow toward the tree line. Beside them ran a second mark. A narrow groove dragged through the white surface. Cole stepped closer. Metal had scraped there. Something heavy had been pulled from the building toward the woods. He followed the trail with his flashlight for nearly 50 yards before the wind began erasing it. Then, somewhere beyond the pines, he heard it. Scrape. Silence. Scrape again. Cole stopped. The sound came once more, faint but unmistakable. Something was moving through the snow, and whatever it was dragging the missing box with it. The sound led Cole deeper into the trees, where the snow lay thicker and the old training grounds gave way to a narrow service path almost hidden beneath fallen branches. His flashlight swept across pine trunks, frozen brush, and fresh paw prints pressed unevenly into the white. Every few yards, the drag mark beside them grew deeper, then vanished where the dog had stopped to rest. Cole followed slowly, listening. Scrape. Pause. A faint breath. Then another scrape. He rounded a bend and finally saw the shepherd standing beside an abandoned training bunker, his body trembling, his head lowered over the canvas strap of the missing ammunition box. For 1 second, Cole forgot the cold. He knew that dog. Not from the tag. From the face. Atlas had been younger the last time Cole saw him. Faster, broader through the shoulders, always watching Ben for the next command. Now gray touched the fur around his muzzle, and exhaustion had taken the sharpness from his posture, but the eyes were the same. Amber. Steady. Waiting. Atlas. Cole said. The shepherd lifted his head. His ears moved forward. Cole took 1 careful step closer. It is me. Atlas stared at him, and something changed. Not excitement. Recognition. A small release in the tension through his neck. Cole crouched. Where have you been, boy? The dog looked toward the bunker entrance. Cole followed his gaze. The metal door stood partly open, snow blown across the threshold. Inside, the air smelled of cold concrete and old wood. Cole remembered the place immediately. Ben had used this bunker for retrieval drills years ago, hiding training objects behind crates and equipment while Atlas waited outside for a command. Cole had stood at the finish point more times than he could count. Back then, Ben had laughed every time Atlas ignored everyone else and delivered the object directly to Cole. Mercer, Ben would call. Take delivery. Cole had always assumed it was a joke. Atlas stepped toward the bunker now, then stopped when his legs shook. Cole moved beside him. No more. But the dog gave a quiet whine and nudged the box. Cole looked closer. The ammunition box had not come from the storage room after all. Snow packed around its lower edges carried old dirt and pine needles, different from the clean concrete inside the facility. The muddy prints Cole had seen must have led through the building, but the box itself had been hidden here. Atlas had brought it out from somewhere inside the bunker. Cole shined his flashlight along the wall and found a faded storage marker near the floor. Behind a stack of rotting wooden boards was a shallow recess just large enough for the box. Ben had used hidden caches during training. Cole remembered that too. Suddenly the pieces began to shift into place. Atlas had not stolen anything. He had returned to a location he remembered, a place tied to an old command. Cole knelt beside the box and brushed snow from the lid. 3 shallow scratches crossed the paint. Ben's mark. Atlas placed his nose against Cole's glove, then looked toward the road. Not back to the bunker. Forward. Toward the parking area where Cole's truck waited. Cole felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Years ago, Ben would hide an object, send Atlas to retrieve it, then point toward Cole at the finish line and say one word. Mercer. Cole had laughed every time. Now Atlas gripped the strap again. Pull. Stop. Breathe. Pull. And Cole finally understood that the old dog was not carrying the box away from something. He was trying to deliver it. Cole reached for the strap, but Atlas tightened his jaw around it and tried to pull again. The movement carried him barely a few inches before his front legs trembled. Cole dropped beside him. No, you already did it. Atlas looked toward the distant parking area through the trees, then back at the box. His breathing came in short white clouds. Cole understood the command now, but understanding did not make the sight easier. Years ago, Ben had turned this exact exercise into a running joke. Hide the object. Send Atlas. Point toward Cole. Mercer. Atlas would race across the training field and drop whatever he carried at Cole's boots, then look back at Ben as if waiting for approval. Cole had never asked why Ben used his name instead of the standard return cue. It had seemed like one more strange habit belonging to a friend who collected strange habits. Standing in the snow now, Cole wondered if Ben had been teaching something more deliberate all along. You found me, Cole whispered. Atlas released the strap at last. Cole lifted the ammunition box by its handle. It was heavier than he expected, but not impossibly so, perhaps 12 pounds, enough to explain why Atlas had managed only short distances through the snow. Cole tucked the box beneath one arm and placed the other around the shepherd's chest. Now I carry it. They started toward the facility slowly. Atlas walked beside him for nearly 20 yards before stumbling. Cole stopped immediately. The dog tried to rise again. That is enough. Cole removed his coat, wrapped it around Atlas, and lifted him carefully. The German shepherd did not resist. His head rested against Cole's shoulder, but even then his eyes followed the ammunition box. By the time they reached the truck, the storm had thickened until the headlights reflected against a wall of white. Cole placed Atlas across the rear seat on a wool blanket, set the box where the dog could see it, and turned the heater higher. He called Dr. Rachel Monroe, who ran a veterinary clinic several miles outside Bozeman and had treated retired working dogs for years. Rachel, I need help. She heard something in his voice and did not waste time asking unnecessary questions. Bring him in. Drive slowly. The trip took nearly 40 minutes. Atlas remained quiet, but every time Cole checked the mirror, the shepherd's eyes were open. Watching. Holding on. At the clinic, Rachel moved quickly, covering Atlas with warm blankets, starting warmed fluids, and checking his temperature while Cole stood near the wall with snow melting from his boots. He is dangerously cold and badly exhausted, she said. But he is still with us. Cole looked toward the ammunition box. Rachel followed his eyes. What is that? I do not know yet. Atlas shifted weakly on the table. His gaze moved immediately toward the box. Cole brought it closer and placed it on the floor where he could see it. The shepherd relaxed. Rachel watched the change. Whatever that is, she said quietly. He thinks his job is not finished. Cole knelt beside Atlas and rested a hand against his neck. You hear me, old man? The delivery is done. Atlas blinked slowly. For the first time since the forest, his paw loosened instead of reaching for the box. Cole looked at Ben's 3 scratched marks on the lid. The answer was sitting 3 feet away. Yet as Atlas began to shiver beneath the blankets, Cole realized there was something he wanted more than the truth. He wanted the dog to stay. Rachel worked quietly while the wind pressed snow against the clinic windows. The room had grown warmer, but Atlas still trembled beneath 2 thick blankets, his breathing shallow and uneven. Cole sat on the floor beside the treatment table with one hand resting near the dog's shoulder. The ammunition box remained only a few feet away. For nearly 2 years, Cole had imagined there might be one final explanation waiting somewhere for him. A message, a reason, something Ben had left behind that could make the silence easier to carry. Now the answer was close enough to touch, and Cole could not make himself reach for it. Rachel checked the thermometer again. Her expression tightened. His temperature is still too low. Cole looked at her. What do you need? Time. Warmth. And for him to keep responding. Atlas opened his eyes at the sound of Cole's voice. The shepherd looked toward the ammunition box, then tried to lift his head. No, Cole said softly. Atlas strained again. Cole stood, picked up the box, and moved it across the room. The dog's eyes followed it. Forget the mission. Cole returned and knelt beside him. You delivered it. I am here. That is enough. Atlas stared at him as if the words belonged to another language. Cole placed both hands gently around the shepherd's face. The fur around his muzzle was still damp from melted snow. Gray showed beneath the sable, more than Cole remembered. "Stay with me." Atlas blinked once. Then his eyes began to close. Cole felt something old rise inside him. The same helplessness he had spent 2 years trying to outrun. He had learned to survive endings by becoming smaller afterward. Fewer calls, fewer friends, fewer places where memory might find him. He had told himself it was discipline. It was not. It was fear dressed like control. "Atlas." No response. Cole leaned closer. "You do not get to carry this all the way here and leave now." Rachel glanced at him, but said nothing. The room seemed to narrow around the quiet hum of the heater and the soft ticking of a wall clock. Cole rubbed his thumb gently along the dog's cheek. "Ben used to say you were too stubborn to quit." "Nothing." Cole swallowed. "Prove him right." A few seconds passed. Then one of Atlas's ears moved. Barely. Cole froze. Rachel leaned closer. Atlas drew a deeper breath. His paw shifted beneath the blanket until it touched Cole's wrist. Rachel checked the monitor, then the thermometer again. The tension in her shoulders eased. "His temperature is coming up." Cole closed his eyes for 1 second and let the relief move through him without fighting it. When he opened them, Atlas was still watching him. "There you are," Cole whispered. The shepherd's paw remained against his wrist. Across the room, the old box waited beneath the yellow light, still sealed, still carrying whatever Ben had hidden inside. Cole looked at it, then back at Atlas. For the first time that night, the mystery felt less important than the breathing beside him. Nearly an hour later, Atlas finally slept without trembling. Rachel lowered the lights and stepped into the hallway. Cole remained beside the dog until his breathing became slow and steady. Only then did he stand. He crossed the room, crouched beside the ammunition box, and placed his fingers against the cold metal latch. "All right, Ben," he whispered. "Now I am ready." The latch gave with a soft metallic click, and for a moment Cole did nothing. He simply held the lid with one hand and listened to Atlas breathing behind him. The dog was asleep now, wrapped in blankets beneath the warm clinic lights, his chest rising with a steadier rhythm than before. Only then did Cole lift the lid. Inside, everything had been packed with care. A layer of waxed cloth covered the contents, dry despite years of Montana cold and damp. Cole peeled it back slowly. The first thing he saw was a faded K-9 unit patch, the stitching worn along the edges. Beneath it rested an old silver whistle on a short cord. Cole knew it immediately. Ben used to wear it around his neck during training, though half the time he preferred using his voice because he claimed Atlas listened better when insulted personally. The memory came so clearly that Cole almost smiled. Almost. He placed the whistle beside him. Next came a photograph, slightly faded but intact. 3 figures stood beneath a bright summer sky at the same training grounds Cole had crossed only hours earlier. Ben in the center, grinning as usual. Atlas seated at his left side, younger and proud. Cole standing on the other side with his arms folded, wearing the expression of a man pretending he had not enjoyed the day. On the back, Ben had written one sentence. "Best days are usually the ones nobody notices." Cole read it twice. Under the photograph lay Ben's military identification tags, wrapped separately in a small piece of cloth. Cole closed his fingers around them. The metal was cold, but the weight was familiar. He remembered hearing those tags tap against Ben's chest while they walked across training fields before sunrise. He remembered coffee in paper cups, wet boots by the door, Atlas stealing a glove and refusing to surrender it. Ordinary things. The kind that seemed permanent until they were not. At the bottom of the box was a sealed envelope with Cole's name written across the front. Not Staff Sergeant Mercer. Not Cole Mercer. Just Cole. His throat tightened. Rachel had returned quietly and now stood near the doorway. She looked at the envelope, then at him. "You want some privacy?" Cole shook his head. "If I wait, I might keep waiting." He opened it carefully. Inside were several folded pages in Ben's familiar handwriting. The first sentence made Cole breathe out through his nose, almost a laugh. "If Atlas brought this to you." Then the stubborn old dog remembered. Cole looked toward the sleeping shepherd. "Of course he did," he whispered. He read the next line. "Now you need to remember too." The warmth in Cole's face disappeared. He kept reading. Ben wrote about the training grounds, about the retrieval drills, about why he had hidden the box there instead of leaving it in a locker. He said some things were meant to be found only when the right person was ready to receive them. Cole's eyes moved more slowly across the page. Then he reached a paragraph that made his hand stop. Ben wrote that the box was never meant to explain his death. It was meant to prepare Cole for what might happen afterward. Ben knew him too well. Knew how Cole disappeared into silence when grief came close. Knew how he confused isolation with strength. Knew that if he ever lost one more person he loved, he might survive the loss and still somehow stop living. Cole lowered the letter. Across the room, Atlas opened his eyes and looked directly at him. Cole understood then that the dog had not dragged a box through the snow because Ben needed to be remembered. He had dragged it there because Ben had been afraid Cole would forget how to remain alive. Cole looked back down at the letter, and the next lines felt less like words from the past than a conversation Ben had somehow delayed until this exact night. He wrote that grief had always changed Cole in the same way. It never made him loud. It made him disappear. After difficult losses, Cole stopped answering calls. He skipped dinners. He volunteered for extra work because empty rooms were easier to avoid when he was too tired to think. Ben had noticed long before Cole ever admitted it. "You call it keeping people from worrying," Ben had written. "I call it leaving before anyone gets the chance to stay." Cole paused. The clinic heater hummed softly. Outside, the storm had weakened, and snow slid down the window in slow silver lines. Atlas remained awake across the room, his head resting on the blanket, watching Cole with those steady amber eyes. The letter continued. Ben explained the old training drill in detail. Years ago, he had hidden harmless retrieval objects inside the bunker and taught Atlas to bring them toward a specific person waiting near the training yard. Most handlers used standardized destination cues. Ben had chosen something personal. Mercer. It had started as a joke because Atlas seemed unusually attached to Cole. But Ben kept using it, again and again, until the word became part of the dog's memory. The ammunition box had been placed inside the bunker months before Ben's final deployment, sealed against moisture and marked with the same 3 scratches he used on his personal gear. Ben never expected Atlas to need it. He simply liked having a plan for things nobody wanted to imagine. "If this box ever reaches you," the letter said, "Atlas did not cross the country looking for you. He remembered the place. And if you are standing there when he returns, maybe that means life has better timing than either of us deserves." Cole let out a slow breath. That mattered. Atlas had not performed some impossible journey guided by a scent 2 years old. He had returned to familiar ground, to the bunker where Ben had trained him, and found the object associated with an old command. Cole had arrived because the facility was closing. 2 ordinary paths had crossed at an extraordinary moment. Then Cole reached the paragraph Ben had clearly wanted him to read most. "Do not make my absence your punishment. Remember the morning coffee. Remember Atlas stealing my glove. Remember the terrible sandwiches from the gas station outside Bozeman. Remember that our lives were more than the worst day in them." Cole lowered the pages as his vision blurred. For nearly 2 years, every memory of Ben had ended in loss. Ben was asking him to remember differently. Atlas shifted under the blanket. Cole crossed the room and sat beside him. The shepherd lifted one paw and placed it against Cole's leg. "So that was the mission," Cole whispered. Atlas blinked. Cole rested his hand over the dog's paw. The final lines of Ben's letter were simple. "If you are reading this, then you are still here. Act like it. Let somebody in. Take the dog home." Cole laughed once through the ache in his chest, quiet and surprised. "He really did know me." Atlas leaned his head against Cole's arm. For the first time since Ben was gone, Cole allowed himself to remember his friend without searching the memory for something he could have changed. And in that warm little clinic, with an old dog beside him and snow finally slowing outside, survival began to feel less like a sentence and more like an invitation. Atlas stayed at Rachel's clinic for 6 more days. By the 3rd morning, he was eating on his own. By the 4th, he could stand without help. On the 5th, he made it halfway across the treatment room before stopping to look back at Cole, as if waiting for permission to continue. Cole had barely left during that week. He slept in a chair, drank too much coffee, and read Ben's letter until the folds softened beneath his fingers. Rachel never asked what he planned to do next. She seemed to understand that some decisions became obvious only after people stopped forcing them. On the 6th morning, she removed the final line, checked Atlas carefully, and said, "He can go home." Cole looked at the shepherd. Atlas looked back. "Yeah," Cole said. "I think he can." The cabin outside Bozeman had belonged to Cole for years, though lately it had felt more like a place where he stored himself than a home. The curtains stayed closed. The refrigerator held little more than coffee, eggs, and whatever required the least effort. Ben had visited once and complained that the place had all the warmth of an equipment shed. Cole remembered that now as he opened the front door and let Atlas step inside. The shepherd moved slowly from room to room, nose low, learning the space. He paused beside the wood stove, circled once, and settled on the rug as if he had made a decision. Cole stood in the doorway with the old ammunition box in his hands. That easy, huh? Atlas closed his eyes. Cole placed the box on a shelf near the stove. He did not hide it. He did not open it either. The next morning, claws clicked against the wood floor before sunrise. Cole opened one eye. Atlas stood beside the bed. No. The dog waited. It is 5:30. Atlas continued waiting. 10 minutes later, Cole was pulling on boots. They walked less than half a mile that first day. Atlas tired quickly, so Cole slowed. The second day, they went farther. Then farther again. Days became weeks. Atlas gained weight. His sable coat recovered its shine. Cole began opening the curtains in the morning because Atlas liked lying in the sunlight. He started cooking real dinners because the dog had learned exactly how long to stare before guilt became effective. One evening, Cole's phone rang while he was washing dishes. He saw the name of an old Marine he had ignored for months. His first instinct was to let it ring. Atlas looked up from the floor. Cole stared at the screen, remembered Ben's words, and answered. Hey, Mike. The conversation lasted 23 minutes. Nothing dramatic happened. They talked about weather, work, an old truck, and whether the coffee near the base was still terrible. When the call ended, Cole realized he was smiling. The next week, he drove into town and met 2 former Marines for breakfast. The week after that, he invited Rachel to stop by and check Atlas. Life did not return in one great wave. It returned like spring snow melt, quietly, one small stream at a time. Atlas had been saved from the cold, but Cole began to understand that rescue had never moved in only one direction. Some nights were still difficult. Some memories still arrived too sharply. On those nights, Atlas would settle beside his chair without being called, warm and steady, asking for nothing. Cole would rest one hand against the dog's shoulder and let the silence remain silence. The ammunition box stayed closed on the shelf. It no longer felt like a mystery. It felt like proof that Ben had known something Cole was only beginning to learn. Sometimes the people who love us cannot keep us from losing them. They can only leave behind enough light for us to find the next step. Spring reached the mountains outside Bozeman slowly, first in the sound of water moving beneath thinning ice, then in the dark soil appearing along the edges of the road, and finally in the first green shoots pushing through places that had been buried under snow for months. Cole waited until the morning sky turned clear before loading Atlas into the truck. The old training facility was almost empty now. The kennels had been cleared, the storage building locked, and most of the equipment had disappeared, leaving only wind, open ground, and memories. Atlas stepped down from the truck carefully, stronger now, his sable coat bright beneath the sunlight. He stood still for a moment and lifted his nose toward the air. Cole watched him. You remember. Atlas started toward the old training field without needing direction. Cole followed with Ben's silver whistle in his pocket. They crossed the yard where the 3 of them had spent countless mornings years before, when life had seemed ordinary enough to be ignored. Cole could almost hear Ben complaining about the cold, arguing with Atlas over a stolen glove, insisting that gas station coffee counted as breakfast. This time, the memories did not crush the air around him. They simply walked beside him. Near the abandoned bunker, Atlas stopped. The snow that had once covered the entrance was gone. Brown grass bent in the breeze, and sunlight reached places that had been hidden all winter. Cole stood where he used to stand during retrieval drills. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. Then Cole took the whistle from his pocket. He turned it over in his hand, feeling the small dents along the metal where Ben had carried it for years. Once, Cole had imagined this moment ending with some grand gesture. A final command. A perfect goodbye. But standing there, he understood that grief rarely needed ceremony as much as people thought it did. Sometimes it only needed permission to become memory. Cole raised the whistle halfway to his mouth, then stopped. Atlas looked at him. Cole smiled. You already know where home is. He lowered the whistle and slipped it back into his pocket. Atlas's tail moved once. Then the shepherd turned toward the truck. Cole laughed softly. Yeah, me too. They walked back across the field together. No command. No urgency. No unfinished mission pulling them toward the past. At the cabin that afternoon, the old green ammunition box still sat on the shelf beside the wood stove. Cole opened it one final time. The photograph rested on top. Ben in the middle, Atlas young and alert. Cole pretending not to smile. He placed the whistle inside beside the identification tags and folded letter. Then he closed the lid. Click. The sound was small, almost ordinary. But this time it did not feel like something ending. Atlas waited by the open front door, sunlight warming the floor around his paws. Cole took his jacket from the hook. Outside, the trail behind the cabin was soft with spring earth and lined with melting patches of snow. Atlas stepped onto it first. Cole followed. Behind them, the box remained closed. Ahead, the path curved between the pines toward a sky washed clean by winter. Cole did not know what the rest of his life would look like. He only knew he was finally willing to be there for it. Atlas glanced back once, checking that he was coming. Cole nodded. Go on, buddy. The old dog turned forward again, and together they kept walking.